Good morning. While the outcome of this war in Iran remains uncertain, what's clear is that the United States is playing by very different rules from what we're used to. Are we in the age of Donald Trump, an age that will end when he leaves office? Or is this president a symptom of a changing world and a permanently changed United States? And more importantly, what should Britain do about it? America remains the world's preeminent military superpower. But for decades, the era of unchallenged American-led Western dominance has been eroding. The rise of China, the re-emergence of Russian imperial ambition in Eastern Europe, the rejection in many democratic nations of a supposed liberal international order holding the West together. The Atlantic Alliance seems under greater strain every day. Many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative. Some of the president's social media comments and posts have dismayed me too. Perhaps his successor will return to more traditional diplomacy, perhaps not. Regardless, we must not miss the underlying lesson. Trump's presidency is not the start, but a continuation of a change in US outlook. For decades, the United States has been complaining, at least privately, that Europe is not pulling its weight on defense. President Trump may be unorthodox in how he speaks to us, but there are forces at play here that are much larger than his presidency. The mirror that he is holding up to Europe, and that we find so uncomfortable to look in, is showing us that without the United States, we cannot properly defend ourselves. At present, European strategic autonomy is a fairy tale. Even parts of our own British nuclear deterrent are dependent on America. Whether these shifting sands are being driven by Donald Trump doesn't matter. Britain's response and the actions we must now take are the same either way. We must reassert ourselves as a serious power in the world, show our allies what we bring to the table, show our enemies that we are ready to defend ourselves. If we do not, we will have no say in whatever comes next. This is not the first time that the world has changed. Throughout history, great powers and great alliances have risen and they have fallen. Athens, Rome, Imperial Spain, the Ottomans, the British Empire. Every time the world has changed, it has continued to be governed by facts of life, geography, strength, diplomacy, strategy, and ever-developing technology. The same is true today. Look at the threats we face in the world. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. These countries do not share a common ideology. What they do share is a common objective: to weaken the West and promote their own economic and strategic interests. The West's shared ideology is a strength that our adversaries lack. But for too long, we have believed that the righteousness of our shared ideology would be enough for us to prevail. It is not. The cold, hard reality is that if the West is to prevail, every country with an interest in freedom must conduct an urgent and brutally honest audit of what we bring to the table. The question I will answer today is: what action must government take to turn Britain into a strong power and reliable ally, a country that can look after itself and that other countries want on their side? We must start by asking ourselves, what exactly do we currently have to offer? What leverage do we have? Why would people want us on their side? 100 years ago, this was obvious. Britain had the world's largest navy, world-leading industry, and an empire and influence that spanned the globe. We still have the bravest and one of the most highly skilled armed forces in the world. We have intelligence capabilities that are universally acknowledged to be world-class. We have outstanding special forces and nuclear submarines whose heroic crews have delivered a continuous at-sea deterrent for decades. But beyond that, we have allowed ourselves to drift into the role of commentator with little capability. General Sir Richard Barrons, co-author of the government's Strategic Defence Review, stripped away the pretense when he said, today's army, frankly, could do one very small thing. It could seize a small market town on a good day. The heart of every patriot, everyone who cares about our armed forces, will have shrunk at the news that our Royal Navy had not a single warship in the Gulf as war was breaking out. And then at the time it took to get HMS Dragon to the Mediterranean, only for her to run into technical problems. You don't need to be a military expert to know that this is not how things should be. I pay tribute to Dragon's crew and everyone serving in the Middle East right now. This is not the fault of the Royal Navy. It is the culmination of long-standing policy failures, which have left our defense capabilities arguably at their weakest in 400 years. I don't need to tell you how this happened. Between 1989 and 2022, defense spending fell in every year. One of the authors of that Strategic Defence Review has since said the UK is trapped in a conspiracy of stupidity because politicians won't make the case for cutting spending to fund defense. And he's not the only one who thinks that. In Washington, US administrations have felt for years that while America subsidized the defense of Europe, we built welfare systems instead. On this point, they are right. Before the Second World War, 1 in every £7 the British government spent went on health and welfare. By last year, it had soared to 1 in every £3. We have grown fat on welfare, prioritizing benefits over bullets. Britain has overspent the peace dividend that followed the Cold War, and politicians of all colours, as well as the electorate, prioritised more immediate day-to-day concerns over defence. They ignored evidence that this era of peace would not go on forever. They looked away from Georgia, from Crimea, hoping they were anomalies. Then Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That was the moment we couldn't ignore. The Conservative government responded rapidly and unequivocally. We led the world in convening support. We trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and equipped them with our missiles. If it wasn't for our actions, Kyiv could now very well be under Russian control. And we found some money to increase defense spending. That was not enough. For a proud nation used to stamping its influence on the world, Britain's lack of readiness for this war in Iran has been shocking. We weren't just unprepared militarily, with no Royal Navy warships in the Middle East for the first time in decades. We were strategically unprepared too. The UK government was warned about US-Israeli strikes in advance. It was obvious that in the event of a conflict, our bases and our allies would be targeted. But just before the conflict began, our only active minesweeper was taken out of the Gulf. Our only active destroyer was stuck in Portsmouth. We seemingly had no plan to protect our citizens in the region. Britain looked taken by surprise and woefully unprepared, while our allies in France and in Greece mobilized quickly. And it happened because we have a government that was politically unprepared for this war, distracted by its own infighting and psychodrama, too busy scratching itches from opposition about the two-child benefit cap, about taxing private schools, to notice what was coming. They've now spent more time reversing their own decisions than preparing for this war, looking inward instead of outward. I'm not a military expert, but I do understand the nature of power. Power does not come from wishful thinking. Power does not come from speeches about values if those values are not defended by hard capability. I will be honest, The Conservative Party made mistakes in government. We did not do enough, early enough, to rebuild the resilience and readiness that a more dangerous world required. We are under new management. I will not repeat those mistakes, but we need Labour and other parties to learn those lessons too. The Lib Dems think the answer is more borrowing when we are already spending more on debt interest than we spend on defence. The SNP want us to give up our nuclear weapons. The Greens want us to leave NATO. Nigel Farage is still blaming NATO for the invasion of Ukraine. Reform haven't even bothered to announce who their foreign or defence spokesmen are. Reform plan to spend the billions from restoring the two-child benefit cap, not on defence, but on cheaper beer. This is not serious. The war in the Gulf must act as a wake-up call, not for navel-gazing or finger-pointing about who did what, but for action. Let's start by urgently deploying the resources that we do have to serve our national interest in this conflict. We must show our allies and our enemies that we are willing to get our hands dirty. That doesn't mean that when President Trump says jump, we ask how high. No, it means acting decisively to protect British interests. What message does it send to our allies when we don't defend our own bases from attack? How would bygone captains of the Royal Navy feel if they knew that we were bailed out by the French? Of course, we must be careful how we tread, but sitting on the fence is not a strategy. We must look beyond this conflict in the Middle East and develop the resources we need to respond to this new era of threats. We have a huge amount of work to do to reassert Britain as a power in the world. First and foremost, we must rearm. If our military is strengthened, our hand is strengthened. We must undertake the biggest peacetime program of rearmament in our country's history. To do that, we need the money to pay for it. Keir Starmer claims he wants to spend 3% of GDP on defence. Last year, his government published a strategic defence review explaining why we need it. But here we are, 9 months later, and we still haven't seen the defence investment plan. It was promised last autumn. We're hearing it won't be coming until next autumn. This is a national scandal. Yesterday, the Defence Secretary told you not to worry because we are ready. I'm not here to lie to you. We are not ready. At a time of war in Europe and war in the Middle East, at a time when these conflicts are affecting every family across Britain, at a time when Britain's place in the world is in flux, our government literally does not have a plan. There is no plan for how the government is going to buy the equipment, weapons, and munitions. There is no plan for how to enact the Strategic Defence Review. There is no plan for rearming Britain. I asked Keir Starmer about this at Prime Minister's Questions, and he put his head in his hands. The reason there's no plan is because they have no idea how they are going to pay for it. It's time to make some tough choices. The question is not whether Britain must rearm. It's what choices we must make to do so. That is what seriousness looks like, and that is what my new Conservative Party has been doing. I have announced that the next Conservative government would reinstate that two-child benefit cap, about £3 billion, and spend the money saved on defence. That money will fund the largest net increase in British troops under any government since the Second World War. We will use that money to recruit 6,000 regular soldiers and 14,000 reservists, as well as paying for their accommodation and equipment. I have said that we will reallocate £17 billion from government R&D and Ed Miliband's disastrous net zero projects to create a new sovereign defence fund. This fund will invest in British defence startups, protecting our supply chains and delivering drone technology right across our armed forces, ensuring our Army, Navy and Air Force can fight as war is fought today. It's not yet 3%, but it is a start. We will find more savings until we get there. I have chosen my priority, and that is to keep British families safe. This will require tough decisions. But rearming Britain cannot wait until the next Conservative government. So I say to the Prime Minister, let's put party interests aside. Let's find the money to rearm. Let's identify the spending cuts. And if we reach agreement on a joint plan, Conservatives will support those measures in Parliament on a 3-line whip. Some of you may not know, but I didn't start work with a politics background. I trained as an engineer. In engineering, something either works or it doesn't. It's either built or it isn't. There is no hiding behind clever phrases when the bridge collapses or the system fails. Too often in politics, we do the opposite. We treat words as a substitute for action. And that might work for a while in some areas of government. It does not work in defense. Last year at this conference, the Prime Minister said that defense was the central organizing principle of his government. Nothing he has done since then has shown that to be true. Our armed forces cannot be strengthened by press releases, and our enemies are not deterred by speeches. They are deterred by ships in the water, jets in the air, munitions in stock, and allies who know we will turn up. So if I have one ambition in this role, it is to drag our politics closer to engineering, to move from mere performance to delivery. Here's what defense, as a central organizing principle, looks like. Doing 5 key things. First, building capacity with new equipment, key capabilities, and cutting-edge technology. So we must think carefully about what weapons are most useful to deter aggression against us. Modern warfare is entering an era of mass, cheap, autonomous weaponry. Drones are becoming obsolete after 6 weeks in the field. 6 weeks. Buying kit that takes 10 years to build, but that can be destroyed by a cheap piece of fiberglass is not a good use of our money. We must gear up for this era of rapid innovation in warfare. That means making sure our military is integrated with the private sector. We have a superb defense industry in this country, some of the most strategically valuable companies in the world. We have world-leading AI and quantum sectors, which will play a huge role in the next generation of weaponry. Britain is well placed to do smart rearmament. Our economy stands to gain tens of billions if we get it right. Second, supporting our defense industry with better regulation and nimble procurement. Britain has a proud military history. Naturally, we have sought state-of-the-art capability in every area of combat. But we must face the reality that defense procurement has taken too long and costs have not been controlled. The war in Ukraine shows us the folly of this. If we want to turbocharge our defense industry, we must first remove the structural barriers that are currently blocking investment, and government needs to dismantle the red tape holding companies back. Ukrainians want to build drones in the UK. They need gigafactories pumping out millions of drones. But drone manufacturers are struggling to get bank accounts because of absurd ESG regulations. It can take 6 months to get permission to test drones in the UK. Britain cannot slow the world down. We must speed up to meet its pace. Last month, I visited MSubs, a small defense company in Devon, who are developing cutting-edge maritime drones. But they are having to test their drones abroad because our regulations won't let them test beyond the breakwater. How are we supposed to deliver the Navy of the future if our defense companies can't test their own drones in the open seas? Third, prioritizing cheap energy. How can our defense industry compete when it pays 4 times more for electricity than American businesses? Britain is especially vulnerable to energy price shocks because we are not treating our energy security like the national emergency it is. It is time to ditch the green levies choking businesses, drill our own oil and gas, and get Britain's industry moving. Fourth, ending the lawfare, which is weakening Britain. We need to stop pursuing our veterans through the courts. Thank you. Of course, our soldiers should fight within the law. But the reality of war is that split-second decisions determine life and death. Pursuing people through the courts decades later, as Labour is doing with its Troubles legislation, is not only morally wrong, it limits our ability to recruit and retain people in the military, particularly our special forces. That is why my party's policy is to leave the ECHR, because among other things, we must protect our veterans and our servicemen and women. The Labour government's obsession with lawfare is summed up by their Chagos deal, the site of a vital US-UK defence base that they are giving away to a country in the orbit of China and paying billions of pounds to do so. This is astonishingly naive. It is romantic fiction to believe that countries will judge us based on how nice we are. They will judge us on what we bring to the table, on what leverage we bring, on what power we can protect and enforce. How much does our value to the US decrease if we give the Chagos Islands away? How much less do they need us? How much more do we need them? So I welcome the news that the Chagos surrender may finally be on the dust heap where it belongs. This latest U-turn simply underscores yet again the value of Conservatives in opposition fighting for what we believe in until the government changes its mind. And fifth in this strategy, not only must Britain offer something to its allies, we must be ready to stand up for ourselves if that's what it comes to. Look at Poland. They understand the threat on their doorstep. They have orders in place for up to 1,500 tanks by 2030. Britain has fewer than a tenth of that in operation. The Poles know what they believe in, and they are ready to defend it. No doubt they feel stronger as part of an alliance, but they can also defend themselves if they must. Look at Finland, who can mobilize 285,000 fully trained and equipped troops in a matter of days. Both countries show that this goes beyond funding. You also need political will. That's what defense as a central organizing principle in government looks like. That's what's missing, and that's why we are not ready. Finally, Britain must find the line between loyalty to our allies and strategic independence. As an American friend put it to me recently, there are two kinds of country in the world these days: those that talk and those that fight. President Trump is right to question whether Europe is ready to face the threats of our age. He is right to question what we bring up to our alliance with the United States. But he was wrong to insult Britain's army and navy. He was wrong to denigrate our brave servicemen and women who served in Afghanistan. And he was wrong to make childish remarks about the Prime Minister. I am Keir Starmer's biggest critic. But close allies should disagree in private. The West needs to present a united front. Idle threats about Canada and Greenland do not serve our interests. They directly benefit our enemies. The more we squabble about Greenland, the less we focus on Ukraine and Taiwan. And our enemies are delighted every time Western bonds weaken. They are using every lever they can pull to accelerate it, weaponizing social media, funding illegal immigration, disrupting trade. Make no mistake, the geopolitical objective of the Chinese Communist Party, its dependence in the Kremlin, Islamist militants and anti-Western dictatorships is to isolate, then surround, and eventually defeat the United States. America is right to hold a mirror up to our end of the bargain, but it is wrong to think that it can beat this threat with an isolationist America First approach. American self-interest requires engagement, not isolation. So we must reset our relations with the United States. Whether we like it or not, Europe cannot easily fend for herself without a strong alliance with Washington. Only the Conservative Party is speaking honestly about the threat we face, and only the Conservative Party is beginning to set out what readiness will require. This should be a moment of huge concern, but I also think it's a moment of hope. Because realism is not pessimism. Realism is the beginning of serious action. Realism is how nations survive. The world is moving too fast to wait until the next election. We need to force the government to confront reality now. Britain has the strengths that matter: outstanding servicemen and women, brilliant intelligence, world-class universities, a powerful defense sector, leading-edge technology, and the freedom to act if we choose to use it. So this is not a message of despair. It is a call to seriousness, a call to rebuild, a call to be ready. The countries that thrive in this century will not be the ones with the best speeches. They will be the ones with the clearest eyes, the strongest nerves, and the hard power to defend what they value. That is what readiness requires, and that is the work I want us to begin now. Thank you.
Thank you. You talked there about your response seeing an American president be so critical of your opposite number, Britain's Prime Minister. I mean, what's your sense? Do you think that this shift in the US is permanent? I mean, it's obviously contingent on the next presidential election, but what does your gut political instinct tell you?
So my instinct comes from my experience. I was Trade Secretary between 2022 and 2024, and I didn't find the US particularly friendly under President Biden. I actually found it quite hostile on trade. So this has been a long time coming. And I remember having very, very difficult conversations with my counterparts, not just in the US, sometimes in Canada, over trade and how much pork we wanted to import and hormone-treated beef and all of that. And it got very feisty, but it was never public. I do find the nature of the public remarks very disconcerting because everybody's watching. It's not, it's not just on social media and the citizens of our respective countries. Iran is watching, China's watching, Russia's watching, and what they see and that is being reinforced is a weakening of Western bonds, and that is not something that we should allow.
And you said without the US, Europe can't defend itself. Just what does that mean for NATO? I mean, does that mean you think that should we prioritize the European pillar of NATO? I assume that you don't think we should essentially prioritize the European Union. We had the Joint Expeditionary Force countries here yesterday and are here today at the conference. Is it a combination of all of those things?
So I'm someone who believes very much in alliances. I don't like it when countries go it alone, whether it's us or the US. Strengthening alliances is important, and I think we've taken it for granted. I think that when I listen to some of the rhetoric in Parliament, because a lot of my views come from hearing my fellow legislators and politicians speak. And they sound like they want us to go it alone. We don't need this, we don't need that, we don't need the US. And I think it's because they don't actually understand just how much we rely on these alliances, primarily the US, but yes, also in Europe. People don't know what Israel helps us with when it comes to security and intelligence. They are very complacent, and I want us to strengthen the alliances. It's not really about prioritizing one particular area or another. It's really about spending. If you want to show that you are serious and believe in an alliance, you need to spend some money. And all of us in Europe, it's not just the UK, all of us in Europe have not been spending the money on defense. We've been spending it in one way or another on welfare. That has to stop.
Yeah, tell us about this phrase you had, benefits over bullets. What does that mean in practical terms? Because the politics of this, for all of the parties in the UK, is really difficult, isn't it? I mean, we know if you go to Parliament and you talk privately to people about the triple lock, for example, the triple lock on pensions, which all the major parties are committed to, everyone will say it's unaffordable, but no one knows quite how to tell the public. And that's just one example. So how do you go about that in practical terms, persuading people that they're going to have to give up stuff that they want and desire?
So government, you say it's difficult. Of course it is. Government is about doing difficult things. If it was easy, you wouldn't need government. You could just do it or let civil servants do it. Politicians are there to make the trade-offs. All of politics is trade-offs. And whenever we pretend that we don't have to make trade-offs, that we can have everything, then we run into trouble. So I speak a lot about welfare. At the budget, I called it a budget for Benefit Street, that Rachel Reeves was basically taxing people to pay for more benefits, because that's really what they're focused on. And we can have a conversation about whether the triple lock is the place to start. I don't think so, because it is still redistribution. The number of people of working age who are out of work is extraordinary. We've got 700,000 graduates out of work. When we left office, and this was high after COVID, 2,000 new people each day were claiming out-of-work benefits. This is not disability. The number today is 5,000 new people each day. That's where we need to start. People are not working. We need growth. Without growth, defense, triple lock, all of that is gone. And we're not having a serious conversation about growth. That's why that 5-point plan, which I sort of outlined, had regulation, stripping regulation away. We've got to get growth. We need to start moving quickly, get Britain working again. If we start with growth and we get the growth, then we can look at other things. But no one wants to have serious conversations about cutting spending. I do. I have said that we are going to bring the welfare bill down. We found £47 billion of savings, about 23 billion of those come from welfare, and very specifically, when Labour reinstated the two-child benefit cap, we have said that we are lifted the two-child benefit cap. We have said that we will reinstate it, and we will use that money to pay for defence, pay for more troops, and also pay down the deficit, because we are also borrowing far too much. We are spending more on the interest on debt than we are on defence. That is also part of the problem.
I mean, if you look at the polling, it's pretty clear that the voters think that we're in a war era. But if you ask them whether they're prepared to make sacrifices, I mean, in terms of spending and benefits, it's not yet clear that they will. They seem pretty much, they're worried about the situation, but they want things to stay the same. Looking ahead to the next general election, I mean, you're going to be in a situation where Nigel Farage is still going to be committed to a lot of this spending. I doubt that he's going to go into the election promising to cut public spending or welfare, as many of his voters rely on that. The other parties won't be. I mean, are you saying that your position, you'll be the party that's essentially advocating public spending cuts to fund defence?
We are the only party that is seriously committed to fiscal responsibility. We have a golden economic rule. Wherever we find savings, we will invest, but we will also be paying down the deficit. We did it before. We didn't stop the debt because the deficit was still there, but we did cut the deficit every year until COVID. It can be done. But what we stopped doing across the political class is making arguments. I don't use polls to tell me what to do or what to think. They can tell me what the public are thinking, but we can't use the polls to decide how to design policy. That's actually what's been happening. If you ask the public, what do they want? They want more on NHS, they want more on welfare, and that's what politicians were doing. We have to stop using polls as a way of running the country. Use polls to let people, to understand what the public think, but if you believe that what you're doing is right, then make the argument. That's what I'm going to be doing now. We need to make the argument about why spending cuts are necessary. If you ask someone in a poll, would you like X or Y, they'll probably give you a very simplistic answer. It is very easy to manipulate these polls by providing added context. If you tell people that their children are going to be in debt, they're probably going to be at war with, Iran or somewhere else, in a few years, and then you say, do you want to spend more on defense? They will say yes. But if you just ask them, do you want to spend more on defense or would you like more money for the NHS? Of course they're going to say more money for the NHS. We need to stop asking people stupid questions, and we need to also make sure that we don't use the polls to inform how to run a country. That's what the government is elected to do. You set out your stall in advance and you use your time before government to think very clearly about what it is you want to do. That's where Labour ran into trouble. Their whole strategy was, we're not Conservatives. And that was enough to win in 2024. But it's not enough to run the country. They need a strategy. We have a strategy, and we are improving it and developing every day. I'm not going to waste the time in opposition, because when we come back, and we will, we're going to have to be ready on day one.
One of the things I learned in the financial crisis and writing about it was that sometimes stupid questions are the best questions, or rather straightforward questions are the best questions. And if you look at the national debt from 2010, I want to just talk a little bit about legacy in the context of defence, but you look at the national debt from 2010 through to 2024, when the Conservatives leave office, and it's still rising for reasons which you've argued and explained. Yes, there's COVID in there, but the rise is, even despite austerity, so-called austerity, the rise is still extraordinary. And within that are major cuts to defence that happened in 2010. I just wanted you to reflect a bit on this question of cross-party responsibility, which I think I increasingly find it quite frustrating that the parties, that Labour wants to say it's all about those 14 years. It seems to me it's a story of 20 years of 20 years of collective political class failure begins under New Labour, but crucially, that 2010 coalition government undertakes changes, Cameron and Osborne, that turn out to be, considering what happens with Russia and Crimea and everything that flows from that, and then China, that turn out to be absolutely disastrous choices, aren't they? Don't we need to get to a point where both of the major parties will admit how serious the mistakes were?
I don't think anyone is saying that mistakes weren't made. So I wasn't there at the time. I came into Parliament in 2017, but I do not remember there being a huge clamour for more defence spending in 2010. The Liberal Democrats were in coalition. Perhaps there were conversations about defence spending, and they might have had different views. I don't know. But a lot of what we're saying right now is hindsight analysis. In 2008, 2010, Russia was still in the G8. There was the golden, age of relationship with China. People didn't see threats back then. So a lot of what we're saying now is hindsight analysis. If someone had said, let's spend 3-4% of defense back in 2010, I think they'd probably have been laughed at. It's very easy now to know that it's a mistake, but I don't remember people really clamoring for more defense spending till past 2014 after Crimea. That's when I really spotted it. And the austerity, as you call it, I don't believe it was austerity because there was still an increase in spending. The deficit still continued, was something that was spread pretty much in every department outside the NHS and I think some parts of education or the school's budget. And that's what people wanted. So I don't think that us ruminating over, well, should we have spent more or who made that mistake back then, I don't think it helps anyone. No one here has a time machine that's going to fix that. We all know the situation today. The real question is, what are we going to do now? And every second spent on, well, it was you who did this and it was you who do that, is a second that is being spent not discussing what the strategy today needs to be. So I'm very happy for commentators to carry out that conversation. What worries me is when the government spends its time saying, oh, but you didn't spend money on defense, when at that time they were asking us to spend more on welfare. They were asking us to spend more on the NHS. The idea that things would be in a better place if Conservatives hadn't been there, I think, is for the birds. A lot of mistakes were made, and there will be books written about that, but it's not too late for us to start rectifying that. That's what the speech is about. What do we do for the future?
You said you'd support the government on rearmament measures. I mean, how far would you go? I mean, that was, in parliamentary terms, an olive branch, because to do what you're suggesting would require the Prime Minister on the defence investment plan and other changes potentially to be at odds with his own party. Are you saying that you're prepared to work cross-party in Parliament to get more spending on defence?
Yes, we have to. We have to. There were far too many unserious people in Parliament, and this is the most left-wing Parliament we've ever had. It's basically just us. There's 115 Conservatives, nominally 8 people in Reform, but they don't want to cut spending really either. And then it's everybody else on the other side: SNP, Greens, Lib Dems, Labour. There's about 500 people who are very, very much on the left, and he's going to need to have serious conversations with his party And I know he won't get all that support. So I'm offering support. It's not the first time I've done so, by the way. We've done this on welfare, offering to fund spending cuts. But he doesn't really have the political will. And I think, given everything that's happened over the last 6 months to a year, he's becoming more and more a hostage to his backbenchers, not really in control. And the fact of the matter is, most of those people came to Parliament to spend more money. They didn't come to Parliament to cut. And so it's just not in their DNA. They don't want to do it. They don't like it. And we, to be perfectly honest, need you guys, all of you in the audience, making this case as well. It can't just be me and Conservative MPs. Too much of the conversation is happening in the political space. It needs to happen everywhere, across business, across industry, everywhere. It cannot just be in Parliament, because as long as it's happening in Parliament, the public aren't hearing the arguments, and then they will keep asking for more spending.
We'll see. Kemi Badenoch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.